Thunder in the steppe, cold open, 2 minutes. It is July 5, 1943. Before dawn breaks over the Russian steppe, the earth begins to tremble, not from an earthquake, from metal, from fire, from the weight of human ambition grinding against human survival. In the darkness, Soviet soldiers crouch in trenches so deep they can barely see the stars. They have been waiting, watching. They know what is coming. They have always known. Somewhere to the west, a German officer receives his final orders. His hands are steady, his jaw is set. In a few hours he will command the largest concentration of tanks ever assembled in human history. Over 3 million men, 8,000 tanks and self-propelled guns. Everything Germany has left to gamble. By sunset, this place, a bulge in the Russian front near the city of Kursk, will be transformed into a furnace. The Soviet Union and Nazi Germany will throw their remaining strength at each other with a desperation that borders on apocalyptic. One of them will break first, and the course of the war and the world will shift forever. Act 1. The World Before. 5 minutes. It is the winter of 1942. Somewhere in the frozen hell of southern Russia, the German Sixth Army is dying. In the snow around Stalingrad, men freeze to death standing upright. Their ammunition runs out, their food is gone, their hopes evaporate like breath in the sub-zero cold. By February 1943, the Soviet Union has achieved something many thought impossible. They have defeated the Wehrmacht in a pitched, city-to-city battle. The myth of German invincibility shatters like ice. But Hitler has not given up. He has merely changed his strategy. As spring thaws the frozen steppe, German intelligence reports something that catches the Führer's attention like a hook through the jaw. A massive Soviet salient, a bulge in the front line, has formed near the city of Kursk. It is, on its surface, an opportunity, a weakness, a chance to pinch it off, encircle and destroy the Soviet forces trapped inside, and regain the initiative on the Eastern Front. The operation will be called Unternehmen Citadel, Operation Citadel. In Hitler's fevered imagination, it will be the knockout blow, the strategic masterstroke that will cripple the Soviet Union and buy Germany time to concentrate on the Western Allies. The problem is this: the Germans are not the only ones who have noticed the salient. Soviet General Georgy Zhukov, the man many call the architect of Soviet victory, has also been studying the map. And unlike the Germans, Zhukov is not content to react. He is building a trap. Zhukov understands something fundamental about modern warfare. Intelligence is everything. And through a Soviet spy network so effective it borders on the miraculous, he knows not only that the Germans are planning an attack on Kursk, he knows the date, he knows the objectives, he knows the German order of battle. So, Zhukov does something extraordinary. He orchestrates the largest defensive operation in human history. By the time German tanks begin moving toward Kursk, the Soviets have constructed a network of fortifications so dense, so layered, with anti-tank guns, mines, and artillery, that attacking it is like trying to punch through a steel wall with your bare fists. They have dug 7 defensive belts. Each one is 5 kilometers deep. They have positioned over 5,000 anti-tank guns. They have laid 939,000 anti-tank mines, nearly 1 mine for every single tank and self-propelled gun the Germans will bring to the battlefield. And they have concentrated 3 million men in the Kursk salient, waiting. General Konstantin Rokossovsky commands the Soviet Northern Front. He is a man who has endured interrogation, torture, and the Gulag under Stalin, and survived. Now, he stares at his maps with the grim certainty of someone who knows exactly what is about to happen. In the south, General Nikolai Vatutin commands the Voronezh front. He too is ready, patient, waiting for the Germans to come. On the German side, Field Marshal Erich von Manstein commands Army Group South. He is brilliant, ruthless, a master of armored warfare. He believes that with enough concentrated force he can shatter the Soviet defenses and win a strategic victory. But even Manstein harbors doubts. He has been warning Hitler that the longer they wait, the stronger Soviet defenses become. In a meeting with the Führer, Manstein argues for an immediate attack. Every day of delay allows the Soviets to dig deeper, to prepare more thoroughly. Hitler hesitates. The new German tanks, the Panther and the Tiger, are not yet ready in sufficient numbers. The new assault guns, the Ferdinand, are still being produced. Perhaps, Hitler thinks, if we wait just a little longer, we will have overwhelming technological superiority. It is a fatal error in judgment. Zhukov, meanwhile, does not rest. He prepares not just to defend, he prepares to counterattack. The Soviets mass vast reserves behind the front lines. They accumulate ammunition and fuel. They train fresh divisions. By the time Operation Citadel is finally approved by Hitler to begin on July 5, 1943, Zhukov has transformed the Kursk salient from a weakness into the most heavily defended sector of the entire Eastern Front. The stage is set, the trap is baited, and both sides know the stakes. This is no longer a war of conquest or ideology. This is a battle for survival. For the Germans, a desperate throw of the dice, one last attempt to recapture the strategic initiative before it is lost forever. For the Soviets, a chance to prove that they can not only defend, but destroy the Wehrmacht once and for all. The temperature rises as July begins. The steppe is dry, the visibility is excellent, conditions are perfect for tank warfare, and still the armies wait. The soldiers pray to God, to luck, to whatever might keep them alive for one more day. Because they all sense it. In the air, in the tremor of the earth, in the grinding machinery of war shifting into gear, something enormous is about to happen, something that will reshape the course of history. Act 2. The Storm, 10 minutes July 5, 1943, 4:30 a.m. The darkness over the steppe fractures like glass under the weight of German artillery. Over 700 guns open fire in unison. The sound is not merely loud, it is a presence, a physical force that drives the air from your lungs and vibrates in your bones. For 30 minutes, the bombardment continues. Shells scream through the pre-dawn darkness. Explosions bloom like flowers of fire across the landscape. Then, at 5 a.m., the German tanks begin to move. From the north, Colonel General Walter Model commands Army Group Center. His offensive will drive south toward the city of Orel, attempting to penetrate the Soviet defenses and link up with Manstein's forces coming from the south. Model is a capable commander, but he is operating blind. He does not know that Zhukov has reinforced the northern salient with Soviet reserves specifically to blunt his attack. From the south, Field Marshal Manstein commands Army Group South. His objective is to drive north and break through to Orel, trapping the Soviet forces in the salient in a massive encirclement. The problem is immediately obvious. The Soviet defenses are more formidable than German intelligence estimated. Model's advance encounters the first defensive belt almost immediately. His tanks cannot simply drive through. There are anti-tank guns hidden in ravines, mines waiting in the grass, infantry with handheld anti-tank weapons lurking in every fold of terrain. Progress is measured in hundreds of meters per hour, not kilometers. Soviet T-34 tanks, the finest medium tanks in the world, emerge from concealed positions and counterattack. The fighting becomes desperate, hand-to-hand in places. Soviet infantry rise from their trenches and engage German panzer grenadiers in brutal close-quarters combat. By noon on July 5th, it is clear that Operation Citadel will not be a swift breakthrough. It will be a grinding, bloody, attritional slugfest. In the south, Manstein's offensive makes more initial progress. His forces, including the elite SS Panzer Corps with their new Tigers and Panthers, breach the 1st and 2nd Soviet defensive lines. For a moment, just a moment, it appears that the German gamble might work. But Zhukov is waiting. The Soviet commander has deliberately allowed the Germans to penetrate the outer defensive belts. As Manstein's forces surge forward, Zhukov unleashes the strategic reserve, fresh Soviet divisions that have been held in readiness for precisely this moment. The Battle of Prokhorovka occurs on July 12, 1943. It will be remembered as the largest tank battle in history. On a piece of steppe near the village of Prokhorovka, two massive armor formations collide head-on. The Soviet 5th Guards Tank Army, commanded by Lieutenant General Pavel Rotmistrov, charges directly toward the advancing German panzer divisions. It is not tactically sophisticated. It is not a maneuver warfare masterpiece. It is pure Soviet determination. Thousands of tanks rolling forward in waves, crashing against the German armor like a wave of steel. The Germans are outnumbered. Soviet sources claim there are 860 Soviet tanks engaged against roughly 260 German tanks and assault guns. The Soviet T-34s are more numerous but less heavily armored than the German Tigers and Panthers. German gunnery is superior. Soviet gunnery is less refined, but there are so many Soviets, so many waves, so many replacements for every tank destroyed. The battle rages for hours. The sky fills with black smoke. The steppe becomes a graveyard of burning tanks, shattered hulks, and bodies. The German Tigers and Panthers take a terrible toll. Their superior armor and firepower allow them to destroy Soviet tanks at a distance, but they cannot stop the tide. By the afternoon, it is clear that neither side has achieved a decisive victory. Both formations have been severely mauled. The Germans have inflicted more tank casualties on the Soviets, but they have not achieved the breakthrough they need. Around the battlefield, smaller but equally vicious engagements continue. At Ponyri, Soviet defenders hold a fortified village for days against repeated German assaults. The Germans bring in assault guns. They bring in tanks. They bring in fresh infantry. Still, the Soviets hold. Not because they are superhuman, but because they have been told that this ground is crucial, that holding it will stop the German breakthrough. And so they hold. Privates and corporals die by the hundreds. Officers are shot down as they lead charges, but the line does not break. German commanders grow frustrated. They are advancing but not fast enough. They are inflicting casualties, but not enough to break Soviet will. And somewhere, in the darkness and smoke, they sense something shifting. They sense that time, which was always their enemy in any war against the Soviet Union, is now running out. It is in fact running out even faster than they realize. On July 12th, the same day as Prokhorovka, Hitler receives news from his commanders in Italy. The Allies have invaded Sicily. The Italian government is wavering. There are rumors of surrender. For the first time, Hitler understands that his gamble on the Eastern Front cannot continue. He cannot afford to pour unlimited resources into Operation Citadel if the Western Allies are simultaneously launching offensive operations in the Mediterranean. On July 13th, Hitler orders a halt to Operation Citadel. The German forces are pulled back, not in disgrace, but in orderly withdrawal. They have achieved local tactical successes. They have inflicted enormous casualties on the Soviets, but they have not achieved the strategic breakthrough. And without that breakthrough, without the encirclement and destruction of Soviet forces, the operation is merely another attritional struggle. And attritional struggle is the one thing Germany cannot afford. But Zhukov does not let them withdraw peacefully. Even as German forces begin pulling back, Soviet counteroffensives are already being launched. In the north, Soviet forces push toward Orel. In the south, they advance toward Belgorod. The Germans, expecting to encircle the Soviets, find themselves pushed backward instead. By the end of July, the Kursk salient has been eliminated, not by German conquest but by Soviet advance. The Germans are back where they started, or worse. The battle is over, but the reckoning has only begun. Act 3. The Reckoning. 5 minutes. The numbers are staggering. The Battle of Kursk produces over 300,000 Soviet casualties, killed, wounded, captured, or missing. It is the bloodiest battle in human history. The Germans lose approximately 200,000 casualties, plus over 1,600 tanks and assault guns. But the casualty statistics tell only part of the story. What truly matters is not how many men and machines were lost, but what is lost along with them. German strategic initiative on the Eastern Front is gone, forever. After Kursk, the Germans will never again launch a major offensive operation in the East. Every battle after July 1943 is a fighting retreat. Every strategic choice is reactive rather than proactive. The Germans have thrown their last punch, and they have failed to land it squarely. The window of opportunity, the moment when Germany might have defeated the Soviet Union through military victory, has closed. Sealed, locked away in the wreckage of Operation Citadel. Manstein and Model, the two German commanders, will fight brilliantly in the months and years to come. But they are fighting battles of attrition now, not maneuver. They are defending, not attacking. The psychological shift is almost as significant as the military one. For the Soviets, Kursk represents something different. It represents vindication. For years, the Nazis have preached German racial superiority and military invincibility. Stalingrad shattered the myth of invincibility. But Kursk proves that Soviet defensive strategy, Soviet ingenuity, Soviet determination can not only survive but thrive against the Wehrmacht. Zhukov emerges from Kursk as the architect of Soviet victory. His reputation is cemented. His strategic vision is validated. The Soviets have proven that they can now not only defend but counterattack, not only survive but advance. The psychological shift is enormous. Soviet soldiers who survived Kursk understand, in a way they never quite did before, that they are going to win this war. The Germans are going to lose. In the months after Kursk, the Soviet Union launches Operation Kutuzov and Operation Suvorov, massive offensives that drive German forces back hundreds of kilometers. The cities of Belgorod and Kharkov are liberated. The Dnieper River is reached and crossed. By the end of 1943, the Soviets have liberated more territory than Germany has since 1941. The momentum, once shifted, cannot be reversed. Germany will continue to fight. They will fight with remarkable courage and skill. But they are fighting a losing battle, and everyone, soldier and civilian, officer and enlisted man, knows it. In Berlin, Hitler receives reports of the losses at Kursk. He absorbs them in silence. Later, he will blame his generals for not pushing hard enough, for not believing in final victory with sufficient faith. But the truth is starker, and in his quietest moments, Hitler understands it. Germany has failed to achieve the quick victory that was always the only path to German triumph. And a long war, a war of attrition against the combined industrial might of the Soviet Union, Britain, and America, is a war Germany cannot win. Kursk did not lose the war for Germany. The war was already being lost by the time tanks rolled across the steppe. But Kursk represents the moment when defeat became inevitable, when hope, which had always been slender, became gossamer thin. The casualties of Kursk are only the beginning. Over the next 2 years, millions more will die as the Soviet Union advances from Kursk toward Berlin. The civilians caught in the path of mechanized warfare will suffer horrors almost beyond comprehension. But the trajectory is set. The momentum is established. After Kursk, it is only a question of how much longer Germany can hold out before the inevitable collapse. The battle that was meant to restore German victory instead accelerates German defeat. Epilogue. 3 minutes. Today, the landscape around Kursk is peaceful. The forests have regrown. The villages have been rebuilt. Children play in fields where, in July 1943, men died by the thousands. The monuments remain. Stone markers, memorials, whole cemeteries dedicated to the hundreds of thousands who fell. Soviet and Russian monuments honor their dead. In Germany, fewer memorials mark the German dead. Germany's role in the war ensures a kind of awkward silence around German casualties. But the earth remembers. Farmers plowing fields in the Kursk region still occasionally unearth shell casings, fragments of tanks, bones of soldiers who never made it home. The land, even healed, bears the scars. Zhukov lived until 1974, a general in the Soviet army, then briefly out of favor, then rehabilitated. He died still planning, still thinking of strategy and victory. Manstein was captured by the British at the end of the war and spent 10 years in Soviet captivity, a prisoner of the very nation he had tried to defeat. He died in 1973, unrepentant, believing that he had fought honorably and that history would vindicate him. Model, the German commander in the north, was captured in the Ruhr in 1945. On a train to a Soviet prisoner of war camp, he shot himself. He could not face the future the Soviets had planned for him. The survivors of the battle, those who were not killed or mortally wounded, carried Kursk with them for the rest of their lives. Soviet veterans spoke of it with pride. German veterans spoke of it with a kind of haunted resignation. But to history, the most important thing about Kursk is not the monuments or the survivors or even the incredible scale of the battle itself. It is what it represents. Kursk is the point where the greatest military empire in the world reaches its limit. It is where industrial capacity meets human determination, and human determination prevails. It is where quantity, Soviet numbers, Soviet reserves, Soviet will, prove superior to quality and innovation. The German tanks at Kursk were, tank for tank, superior to Soviet tanks. The German soldiers were, on average, better trained than Soviet soldiers. The German commanders were individually as skilled as Soviet commanders. But none of it was enough. Because the Soviets had something the Germans lacked, not just manpower, not just resources, but a fundamental will to survive. The Soviet Union was fighting for its existence. Germany was fighting for conquest. In that contest, the nation fighting for its home has always, in the end, prevailed. The Battle of Kursk killed between 500,000 and 700,000 men, Soviet and German combined. It destroyed thousands of tanks. It consumed fuel and ammunition measured in millions of tons, and it determined more than any other single battle the outcome of World War II. Not because one side was superior, but because one side had more men, more resources, more will, more time. The Nazis believed that they could defeat the Soviet Union through a knockout blow. They believed that one brilliant operation, Operation Citadel, the Battle of Kursk, could cripple the Soviet military machine and force surrender. Instead, Kursk became the moment when Germany's fate was sealed. Over the next 2 years, 20 million more would die, mostly civilians, in the grinding advance of the Soviet army toward Berlin. The war would continue. The suffering would multiply. But after Kursk, there was never any doubt about the outcome. The Germans could kill more Soviets, but they could not kill enough. The Soviets could lose more territory, but they could advance it all back. The Germans could hold more cities, but the Soviets would eventually take them. Time itself became a Soviet weapon, and with each passing day after July 1943, that weapon worked more effectively. The survivors of Kursk, all of them, Soviet and German, if any still live, carry something within them that cannot be photographed or catalogued, a knowledge of what human beings are capable of what they endure, of what they lose. They know that the most advanced tanks, the best trained soldiers, the most brilliant commanders cannot always determine the outcome of war. Sometimes the outcome is determined by something far more fundamental, the will of a people to survive, the willingness to sacrifice, the refusal to accept defeat. The Battle of Kursk is remembered as the largest tank battle in history, but it should be remembered as something deeper. It should be remembered as a turning point, as the moment when an empire reached its zenith and began to fall, as the moment when a nation that thought itself invincible discovered that invincibility is a myth, and perhaps most importantly, as a reminder that in the end, no military force, no matter how advanced, no matter how well led, can overcome the will of a people fighting for home. The steppe at Kursk is silent now, but for those who know how to listen, the echo of those engines, those explosions, those screams of the dying still resonates across the years. They remind us of what war truly costs, and why, in the end, even